Okay, good evening, and welcome to the Weird and the Wonderful with Strange Bones. That's me. And we are back to do our usual live and talk about the paranormal and supernatural around the world. And for today, we are looking into the creepy side of Taiwan. Now, it was an interesting little bit of research trying to find out about things. Many thanks there, Lily. Lovely to have you back. Because it seems that exactly what Taiwan really is a little bit confusing. But fortunately, we are interested in the supernatural and the paranormal, and not at all into the politics, which gets very confusing indeed as to whether or not it is a country on its own, whether or not it belongs to China, and all of that confusing kind of setup. So we will happily avoid that, as we should, and instead concentrate on the interesting history and stories. And in fact, there are a number, which is quite nice indeed. So we are looking forward to that very much indeed. So let us see what we have. So many hearts, many, many, many thanks. That is wonderful from you. Now, to situate us and to give us a little bit of an understanding, where and what is Taiwan? Well, Taiwan is an island. It is, to be fair, off the coast of China. It is not terribly far from Hong Kong, for that matter. And in fact, weirdly enough, it is not terribly far from Okinawa, which is Japanese. So make of that as you will and wish. But nevertheless, it is quite distinct in its culture in a number of different ways, which makes it a fascinating place. And I must say, I actually used to have a friend from Taiwan who was quite a charming fellow. And of course, we are in the Philippine Sea, which connects up with the South China Sea and the East China Sea. And Taiwan is kind of smack at the junction between the three of them. Very much in Asia, of course, so we can expect all of the usual things that are particular to the Asian view of things, which matters. So I think that's going to be good. Hey Cam, I'm doing good. I hope you're doing very good as well. Welcome to Fricky, who's joined in here as well. Just a little housekeeping. Remember that we only have one rule, and that's please be polite. You can agree with anything we discover. You can disagree with anything you discover. We very much welcome comments in any way. And we love to have all of the likes, subscribes, and all the rest of it as well. But as I say, you don't have to think any of this is real in any manner or form, or you could believe all of it. It doesn't matter. The main point of this is to discover more things around the world and see what we think about them. And in our usual fashion, we will begin with ghosts. And from that, we will move along to cryptids. And we will see what we can discover. So, I hope you are all ready for this and are interested in finding a little bit about the creepy things around the world, which I think are going to be rather excellent. If you feel so moved that you would like to actually join live, you may request. And I'm sure you would be most welcome. So I think that would be rather good as well. So let us begin. And we are starting off with the typical kind of stories you will expect from Taiwan, which, in terms of ghosts, generally go along the lines of tragic tales of love and betrayal, and social injustice, which reflects very much the history and culture of the island. Popular narratives include the Lintu lass, who seeks revenge for her abandonment, and stories of the Wuri haunted house and Jingling Hospital. And as we very well know, if you want ghosts, the top three places you're likely to find them are battlefields, roads, and hospitals. So I'm sure that Jinglin Hospital will give us something to talk about. I will point out that my ability to speak Taiwanese is limited to about one word. So if I mispronounce, I do apologize. I will do my best, however. And as we toddle along, there's a couple that looked quite interesting, such as the Sesame Hotel, which was an abandoned luxury hotel with all kinds of ghosts, apparently, which promises much. I'm looking forward to that indeed. So, the Wuri Haunted House. Now, an interesting point, if you will, is that in Taiwan they say that during the 7th month of the lunar calendar, it's what the Taiwanese call ghost month. And during that period, for 30 days and 30 nights, that's when the dead especially rise. So they've got a specific time. I don't know a great deal about the lunar calendar, so how exactly that all works out, I'm not sure. So if anyone does know, feel free to comment. But Wuri Haunted House tells the tale of a female dancer who felt cheated when she fell in love with a wealthy businessman, and one day she dressed herself all up in red, did herself up nicely, went into the main bedroom of their unfinished house and hanged herself. And from that day forward, stories abound of the sound of a weeping woman and the lights in the bedroom turning on and off. So it seems that whatever happened to cause her to feel rejected in that way caused her to commit suicide, and therein created a ghost. Now, of course, as we very well know, for a ghost to form, you need a great deal of emotion at the time of their death. And I would strongly suggest that anything that causes suicide would absolutely fit to that requirement. Hey, Ruby. The next rather interesting story that I discovered is set in Chiayi country, where the Mincion House stands, an old residence of the Louis family. According to the stories, the host of a house and a female servant once fell in love. Now, of course, that would in no way be permitted within the culture, status and rank in society being what it is. And the hostess of the house found out about it and began to mistreat and abuse the servant, leading her to commit suicide by throwing herself down the well. And ever since then, the ghost of the servant is said to haunt the house and gardens and sometimes be seen crying by the well. And this absolutely does seem to be a bit of a theme to many of the Taiwanese ghost stories. They seem to rather like the tragic love story. The next interesting place is Jinglin Hospital. Now, located in Tianan City, the Jinglin Hospital is one of the largest hospitals in the city, and it was said to be the place to go in its time. However, it became abandoned for 20 years, and locals started telling stories where a long-haired woman was seen gazing out of the window, and from inside you could hear crying and the sounds of somebody walking around when nobody was there. One wonders what it was that caused the woman to become a ghost inside the hospital. But in terms of that, of course, hospitals are very well known for um, their ghosts, and of course, along with the tales of the ghost, there were rumors of malpractice and more. So perhaps that was the reason. Moldy Toes, welcome, welcome. The next interesting one is the Jinhai Tunnel. Now, according to stories, a taxi driver picked up a young woman on the Jinhai Tunnel one rainy midnight and drove her home. He pulled up to our old house where the young lady told the driver that she had left her purse at work and asked if he would wait outside while she got the money. Yes, Lily, you raise a point that is actually fairly common, and it's very much a hard thing to try to answer. Because really, how do you test or find out for sure? So you may very well be right. There's no certainty one way or another. So it's a point that I think is quite reasonable. So in this story, the driver waited 20 minutes, and after that, he decided that I'm not waiting any longer. I'm a taxi driver. I've got to get round and get fares. And so he went up to the door and knocked on the door, and an old man opened the door and simply handed him the money. And the taxi driver was a bit surprised and is the young lady all right? And the old man just smiled and said, sadly, my daughter died in a car accident, and since that day, she comes home every night. I rather like that one as a story. Now, one of the old folklore type tales that has been told by a lot of different people since the 1990s, apparently, is one where, and this, Lily, might in fact fit to what you say, so you may give your comment after this, um, where they caught a fish on the back of which was a human face. And in fact, it's become such a story that they eventually in 2018 made it into a horror movie. And in fact, it was the third installment in the series that eventually they made for this horror series known as the Tagalong. So absolutely, it must be quite a seriously spoken of to make it into a movie. And the Tagalong, as we say, has got 3 movies in its total. The first one started in 2015 that featured a very, very popular Taiwanese urban legend about the girl in the little red dress. And according to the story there, in 1998, a family went hiking into the mountains in Taichung and documented the trip. And in the video, they saw this, thank you, little girl in a red dress trailing behind one of the family members. And shortly after, when they got back home, this same family member died of a heart attack. So it seems there that the ghost was kind of warning, perhaps, or was perhaps the ghost the cause? It's hard to say. The film, in fact, surpassed in Taiwan even the Hollywood movie The Conjuring and broke the 10-year record as the best-selling horror film in Taiwan. So clearly it was very, very well received. 2 years later, they did a sequel, The Tagalong 2, which is also based on this little girl. And that one as well grossed over 105 million in the Taiwanese currency domestically, which is quite impressive. And now, of course, they are doing Devilfish, which is going to be the next installment. So clearly, there is much love for horror movies in Taiwan. So some quite seriously up there Taiwanese actors and actresses in the movie, and in the story, which fits to the original urban legend, if you will. It covers a group of kids who unknowingly release evil spirits into the world after catching a demonic fish from the river. So it certainly promises to be good. And if you're a fan of these kinds of horror stories, no doubt that will give you a something. The next interesting sort of a story we have is Minjeong Haunted House in Chiayi. And according to the legends, at least, it was not always a haunted house at all. It was built in 1929 in Chiayi country for the affluent Louis family, and the haunting only happened after the servant girl committed suicide by throwing herself into the well. And what's interesting about that story is that after this happened, the Louis family soon left the house, even though they had just moved in. And there are suggestions that, in fact, it was because of the ghost that they left. But there are other stories that seem to connect. Other tales blame the vengeful spirit hiding in the well for the killings and suicide of a number of soldiers, some of them Japanese, um, and it seems that this has caused uh, even local soldiers becoming very uneasy at the idea of spending a night near to the home. And in fact, it is so bad that the house currently is entirely in ruins. There's not much of the original home left, but despite the exterior facade being covered in vines and the interior being gutted, the house does still exist, and visitors have described seeing a woman in a white dress crossing the grounds and hearing the sobbing. So maybe there is something to it. And if it's a ghost that can cause people to die, then clearly it's one to be afraid of. The next interesting place is the Keelung haunted house. Um, and we are referring to the rather affluent port city of Keelung. Um, and that makes this particular house the most expensive haunted attraction in Taiwan. It was owned by a very affluent family who gained their money in the mining sector, and they built this Baroque style home in the 1930s. Portion of the house was converted into a bar in the 1950s that catered to American forces stationed in Taiwan, who were on leave in the port. Visitors are unable to explore inside the home now as it is boarded up, but there is now a shop there apparently. Now, according to the story, an American soldier fathered a child with a young woman who was employed by the recently renovated bar. The young pregnant woman wanted to return to America with the soldier, but he refused and, in fact, made fun of her. The young woman, angered by this, set the pub on fire uh, as a form of retaliation against the military stationed in Taiwan. And the young woman and the American soldier were among the many victims of the fire who were injured or who died. And numerous locals have claimed to have seen strange lights at night and the burned face of a barmaid in the house windows since the fire. So it seems that if she couldn't have her man, nobody was going to. And again, as we have said, we see that the idea of love and tragedy are popular topics for the ghost stories. The next interesting one is the Jinjin building in Taipei. And there have been a lot of rumors over the years. And in fact, a number of people have even posted on various groups, including the Facebook group Supernatural Enthusiast Society, saying that they had made they'd received a delivery order for the Jinjin building, and as they rode the elevator to the designated floor, they felt significant shaking and a sudden drop. The elevator initially stopped on the sixth floor before descending to the basement. When the doors opened, they were confronted with a sealed white wall. This left them rather shaken, and they managed to get it going again back to the first floor. Um, but they said that it was a very strange thing. Other people commented, saying things that included, I have visited the building before, unaware of its reputation, and innocently asked the real estate agent why it was so cold. Um, Another one commented that I used to live in the building, and the elevator would inexplicably stop on certain floors. Uh, the elevator, it seemed, would often go haywire, and it made it a very unsettling place. But nobody would, uh, it seems, be able to say what it was that was in there or why these strange things kept happening and why the basement was all bricked up. So perhaps there are more stories that need to be told, but it certainly seems to fit to what Lily is saying, where she says that ghoul ghosts may actually be demons. Perhaps they are. It's a fair question. The Jining public housing, uh, an interesting sort of giant block of flats where an internet celebrity girl died falling from the fifth floor in 2021. There was also in 2004 a strange incident that nobody could quite figure out the why of, where an old woman fell as well and was apparently completely naked when she fell or jumped, whichever way it was, we don't know. Hey there to One Piece Goat, welcome, welcome. The 70-year-old woman was discovered naked and dead in the elevator shaft. The woman's death was initially thought to have been caused by an accident, but forensic specialists were unable to find any clothing near the elevator, and the case got left open. And it seems that here again, the elevators now are somewhat dodgy. The kind of places that you really don't actually want to mess with. And I think if I was in a building like this, I would probably opt to use the stairs, as something clearly went very wrong with the elevators, or perhaps there was a serial killer in the building. Who's to say? Another one, which is, of course, right at the top of the creepy list. When it comes to haunted places, I think uh, amusement parks are definitely right up there. And the Katoris World Amusement Park, back in the day, was one of the most well known when it opened in 1983, and it remained so until its untimely closing in 1994. Hugely popular, very successful, so there's been a lot of speculation over the years as to why it really closed. Um, According to what has been said, at least, the park seems to have closed um, because of its connection to fatalities on the roller coasters. Um, Stories that are not easy to prove, unfortunately, said that as many as 60 people died on one of the rides. Um, Now, others say no, it was due to insolvency and such, but that hasn't been proved either. Nobody knows because the organization in charge of the Katoris World Amusement Park never ever responded to inquiries about any incidents. Regardless of the truth behind its origins, it's earned its reputation as being quite terrifying. And in fact, it even made it into the Tagalong movies that we spoke of, um, with the evil ghost in the little red dress. So it seems that whenever something truly frightening occurs, the Taiwanese run to it and embrace it in a great many ways, making movies and making it popular. So perhaps there's that to it as well. One wonders really what may have actually happened, and if the ghosts remain. I think it fair to say that they might. Hey there to F, welcome, welcome. And much thanks, of course, for the likes. Now, the Dongshai Sea Castle. Well, as we know, during the war there was Japanese occupation of Taiwan, and their presence there um, involved a great deal more than simply moving in and taking over things or converting existing structures, etc. They also built a great deal, um, and they built countless underground tunnels and bunkers along the shoreline of Taichung, um, which included the Donghai Sea Castle as a line of defense against possible Allied invasion. And even though the region is now a well liked location, um, there are a great many ghost stories that fit along with it. Uh, in 1945, the number 13 bunker is one of the most restricted locations. Partly, of course, these days you aren't allowed in because uh, the tunnel's depths and complexities um, are just too dangerous and are no longer properly maintained, so you're basically kept out. But of course, the moment you tell people you can't go in, they start questioning what's inside. And so there are all kinds of stories as to who or what lives within. According to a tale that went viral on Taiwanese social media, when a group of friends snuck into the bunker, they heard a voice calling to them saying that they should come and play with her. And this went on for a little while until suddenly whoever the speaker or whatever it was laughed and exclaimed, "Too late, too late." When a friend who was not in the bunker called for the others to not go down in, the same voice then inquired about the names of the friends outside. And who knows, could it have been a trick? Somebody playing jokes? Um, but given how difficult it is to get into and the fact that it is illegal, seems unlikely that somebody is inside waiting for random people to come in to scare them. So who's to say? Maybe something is inside and it's waiting down there for anyone foolish enough to go in. Now, the largest natural lake in Taiwan is in fact in the highlands, and it is called the Sun Moon Lake, and it is very popular both with residents and tourists, and is part of a great number of tours. For it is famous for its cycling trips and its boating, and it really is an incredibly beautiful place, but it is also the scene of a number of drowning accidents, which forms the basis of the legend surrounding the haunted teacher's hostel. Now, a pleasure boat capsized in 1990, killing 57 people, including 18 children who were on board. And it tipped over the 91 that were on board the boat, though luckily some of them made it to safety. Despite disagreements on the incident's cause, it's generally agreed that overcrowding was a factor, as the boat could only accommodate 60 people properly. Ghosts at the neighboring Sun Moon Lake Teachers Hospital, where you can spend the night, have since reported hearing someone knocking ever since the occurrence, and people calling for help through the windows late at night. And it seems that those that died are still trying to escape drowning, even though they have been dead for as long as they have. The next interesting place is the Hualien Pine Garden. Now, when there was Japanese occupation between 1895 and 1945, a great many structures were used to shelter Japanese soldiers. And on Taiwan's east coast, in the Hualien Pine Garden, there is one such structure. The buildings in the Pine Garden, built in 1942, used to house Japanese kamikaze pilots' training grounds before their one-way sorties. And visitors still report hearing Japanese conversations in the Pine Garden, even though it is now a historical place, and it is a cultural hub that focuses on Hualien poetry. But residents have gone so far to assert that many of the Japanese pilots that went on their one-way trips never left and are still there at the Pine Gardens. Certainly it is quite the place, nevertheless, and it's quite an austere sort of a set of buildings as well. So it's got a certain creepy look, nevertheless. So perhaps we have to accept that these things really did exist. Now we are going to talk about the Sesame Hotel, and it is claimed, at least by a couple of the Taiwanese ghost hunters, that it is one of the most haunted buildings in Asia, a place that's pulled straight from nightmare. And according to this particular fellow who went in, his journey to the location began in his final days in Taiwan, a trip where he sought out the island's most abandoned and haunted places. And after stumbling on some articles and receiving some additional details from friends, he discovered that the place to go if you're looking for ghosts is absolutely the Sesame Hotel. So, with that in mind, he packed his camera and ghost hunting gear, ready to see what he could find. Hey there, Dinaka. And was geared up for the searching with all of his ghost hunting stuff. And he wanted, of course, to know what made it so haunted. Now, the Sesame Hotel in Taoyuan was one of the most amazing, luxurious five-star hotels. Um, and it was known in its day as the Taiwan Miracle. It is now abandoned, but in 1976, when Taiwan was in a period of rapid economic growth, it was a symbol of wealth and success. And its owner, Chang Kedong, a former soldier who had become an entrepreneur, quickly amassed wealth and influence through his construction company and other ventures. But his swift rise was matched by an equally rapid fall. And driven by corrupt business practices and economic downturns, by 1982 he fled to the United States, leaving behind his businesses, including the Sesame Hotel, which closed its doors in 2008. Although most of the furniture was removed from um, the building itself is still there and is slowly decaying. Rumors have spread that the abandoned hotel is haunted, with eerie events occurring in its final days of operation. Some adventurous people have stayed overnight and have reported seeing ghosts, including, and this definitely seems to fit to a theme in Taiwan, a long disabled elevator that nevertheless still moves up and down. So, why might that be? We don't know. Um, some say that it is in fact a portal and the site where somebody tragically fell to their death. The hotel's unusual design, with its oddly numbered floors and neglected amenity, certainly would have contributed to the stories. That's no doubt at all. But um, this fellow that tells of it said that he certainly wasn't afraid and was dead keen to go and see what he could photograph and video and find things out for himself. And indeed, the building is huge, and if it wasn't so decayed, it would indeed be very luxurious. Um, and many of his photos are quite intriguing, but what I find a little sad is he doesn't say himself whether or not he actually did find any ghosts within, which is sort of sad. I would have liked to have found out a bit more. Hey there, notification. Welcome back. Now, we found in a number of places, Japan being a prime candidate for it, and China as well. Um, many ghost stories seem to take place in school bathrooms, which is an interesting sort of a trend. Now, in Taiwan, it is not the bathrooms, but rather the dormitories. And there are all kinds of school stories about uh, dormitories that are haunted. And one such example is from a boarding student at the Taichung First Senior High School during their um, time at the school, and it said that there is a sealed, locked room at the end of the hallway in one of the dormitories. Nobody knows why the room is sealed. However, a student once heard loud noises coming from this apparently empty room and thought somebody had maybe been stuck in for some reason, but the room's seal was fully intact, and there was no sign that the door had been opened in a long time. So they wonder if perhaps it was not a fellow student, but in fact a ghost making a noise, as far as they could tell, there was only one way into the room, and if it had not been opened in many years, what could have been inside? Well, there is apparently no explanation as to why the room was sealed in the first place, which adds to the story, which is interesting. But the locked dorm room is a prevalent theme, and almost every school has one such room that stories hint towards murder and violence and all the rest of the fun things, as you can imagine, in a school dorm. Um, another interesting sort of a variation on these um, is the purge fluid college dorm room, um, which for some reason, as an urban legend, often seems to center on an overseas Chinese student that is staying at the particular place, whose chronic illness causes him to cough frequently. And during a long school break, the student chooses to stay in the dormitory instead of flying back home. And one day his chronic illness worsened, and there was no one in the dorm to help him. And so he passed away in his dorm bed. And it wasn't until the end of the break, when everyone returns, that the students smelt the foul stench wafting from their dormitory, and they traced the smell to the dead body of this Chinese student. Why always a Chinese student? Not clear. But this is an urban legend. And of course, by this time, his body had badly decomposed, and the body fluids were seeping into the mattress and bed frame, making it impossible to separate his remains from the bed. So they had to tear the bed frame apart to remove the body from the place. And ever since then, people report hearing mysterious coughing and hearing creaking noises as if someone were rummaging about looking for their medicine in the middle of the night when there is nobody there. Now, in the Taipei Institute of Technology, there is an old dormitory across from the campus, now no longer used as student housing. It's occasionally still used for club meetups, but nobody ever spends a night here unless absolutely necessary. And there is a good reason for this. While it was still a dormitory, rooms in the building regularly housed 6 students in each room. One year, 5 roommates who had already finished their exams left early for their break, leaving the remaining roommate, who apparently was known as Ayao. With one last exam to go remaining, he was the only occupant. However, Ayao did not show up for his test, and before locking the dormitory down for the summer break, the dorm manager did a final inspection, and he noticed books and other items still on Ayao's desk and assumed that the owner had simply forgotten to take his belongings home. Didn't think much of it, so locked up and left. And after the summer vacation, which extends over 3 months during the hottest and most humid time of the year, and over the summer, his parents filed a missing person report with the police, but no sign of him could be found. The end of the summer vacation, the dormitory reopened to prepare for the new school season, and the first student in nearly fainted from the foul stench. He rushed to find the dorm manager for assistance, and all assumed that a stray cat or something had got caught inside and died. But when they opened the room identified as the source of the odor, um, the decaying corpse covered in maggots was melting into the wall in one of the upper bunk beds inside the room, um, decomposing badly. The school contacted the parents to identify the body, and it was later determined that he had fallen asleep in an upper bunk facing the wall when he had died of a heart attack. Because he was on the upper bunk, he hadn't been seen, and so his body had remained over the very, very hot summer months. And ever since then, unexplained occurrences happen in that dormitory building, and a great number of people say then that it's absolutely haunted. Now, exactly how and what does the haunting is not entirely clear. We assume that it is the ghost of Ayao, but it seems that these sorts of stories are fairly common. And I will say that the Taiwanese versions of these ghost stories um, are always particularly gruesome as well. So it repeats and has become very much something of an urban legend that, quite honestly, one wonders where the original began from. But nevertheless, now one of the most popular ghost stories in Taiwan is the tale of the Lintao Lass, a tragedy that came over with the pioneers in the Qing dynasty. Legend has it that her husband was an official from mainland China posted to Taiwan, and when his term of office was up, he simply abandoned her and returned to China with all of his money. And in that era, when a woman had no autonomy at all, there wasn't much that she could do, and she ended up hanging herself in the Lintu woods. With the help of a kind-hearted person, her spirit crossed the sea and found her husband, and she attached herself to his body. And in a blood-curdling voice, poured out her tragic story to those around, using her husband's own hand to strike him dead with the chop of an axe. Now, of course, these kind of stories are quite common in this sort of scenario with your lovers and abandonment and suicide, and they've been told over and over again in both Taiwanese history and in Chinese history. Uh, they speak of very, very loyal women with very, very unfaithful men, and it's in many ways a way of speaking out um, in a way that shows how repressed the women used to be. And it's so popular, it turns up even in things like the Shui Hui Zhan, which is actually an adventure um, story with bandits and more. Um, but nevertheless, you get the same kind of ghost returning. And they say that pretty much all movies with women ghosts have the same four-stage formula. Man and woman have romance, man's feeling change, woman dies from hate and bitterness, returns as ghost to take her revenge. So it seems that it's a known trope, as it were, that speaks of how ghosts return. Now, they always turn up as having long disheveled hair and white clothing. And white clothing, of course, was your underclothes in older times. Women wore white undergarments right up to their marriage, and thereafter they were carefully stored away, according to the culture, to be worn again only on the day of their death. It symbolizes the woman's virtue and chastity. Also, for the Chinese at least, white is the color appropriate for funerals. So female ghosts always uh, wear white. As for the disheveled hair, well, I'm not too sure. Uh, Times do change, and clothing of ghosts do change, but they say by and large the stories are the ones where they will wear white. Real sightings, it seems, do not always follow the trope, so perhaps the ghosts don't realize that they're supposed to follow a theme. Who's to say? But yes, lots of old stories in terms of that. Now, the next place that we have, between 1949 and 1999, the National Defense Medical Center was located around what is now the Shoyuan campus of the National Taiwan University. And lots of ghost stories seem to have circulated about the site among present day college students. Why was the site haunted and by whom? Um, what are the unfulfilled wishes of the ghosts, and how has it turned about? Now, the modern campus, apparently, they say the Shuyan campus hardly would fit into the prosperous neighborhood of the main campus of the NTU now. Those who visit it would be quite surprised by its desolate feel bordering the river. It is uh, a breezy sort of place with um, sparsely populated buildings and the dormitories in shambles. Um, but while it is rather creepy compared to the main campus, which is much better, it seems that whenever bicycles are left around, they get towed away and stored here, so the NTU students are forced to come and collect them. Now, the ghastly rumors and stories that circulate say that um, a certain part of it was where the autopsies were performed back in the day. And it was one of those situations, shall we say, where the autopsies were not done on medically donated cadavers at all, but on the bodies of those who had been executed in the nearby execution ground. Um, are the stories true? Well, the narrative doesn't deviate too much from reality, it seems, because for a period of time there really was an execution ground between 1949 and 1999. There really was an execution ground for, shall we say, political dissenters. And the bodies resultant, as it were, uh, would be taken to the campus for practice by the medical students. Welcome there to Shelton Frater. Good to have you on board. And Shark, hi, how are you? I hope you're in good form, sir. So, for a long time, the fact that the executed bodies were used as cadavers was not known. Um, but according to the tales, it was found out in an unexpected way, because basically what happened, they say, um, maybe this goes as an excuse or not. You may take it as you feel, but the executed, their bodies would be stored only at the Ecstasy Morgue at the nearby campus, and only if the relatives failed to pick up the bodies would they then um, be taken and used for um, cadavers in class, and then afterwards cremated and buried at Louis Angeli. But where did things go south? Well, it seems that there was a certain young lady who was training at the medical center, whose boyfriend, possibly, uh, was one such person that was to be executed. And after he was, um, his body remained unclaimed for quite a while, and in due form, as was the practice, so to speak, they thereafter um, found use for him. So the family story of Cheng Zhu uh, basically went like this. The father and elder brother of Chen were both arrested in the Luku incident, which apparently is a somewhat famous incident, and herself and her grandmother only learnt of the death long after they were shot. So there was little time to do anything about it, um, and there wasn't much money going. So they went to identify the corpses at the center, um, and there were so many of them that they had to literally go through with hooks on sticks to turn the bodies to find the right ones. So it was obviously a terrible uh, thing, as it were. Uh, so they went and identified and found that her brother and father were indeed deceased, and they didn't actually um, let it be known um, to young Chen. And while she was there and doing her thing, um, she turned up for studies the one day, and there on the table was none other than um, her brother, which obviously therefore caused a great deal of upset. Now, the stories vary a little bit at this point, where they say that she couldn't take the sight of seeing her brother on the table that she was supposed to cut up. Um, and the stress of it caused her to commit suicide. Suicide is very much a common theme as well in many of these ghost stories. And it is said that both those who were dissected because they didn't get proper funeral rites and burial very likely haunt the place, but the young lady herself still haunts the place because of her suicide at the sight of her own brother on the table. So, yep, suitably creepy, if nothing else. Can you imagine going into doing a bit of schoolwork, and right there you have your own family maid unexpectedly sitting there on the table? I think it would definitely give people a certain jump. Now, amongst other things, we've told the story of the Minjeong house, and according to the actual family involved, the Louis family, they say it's a load of rubbish, and it is complete lies. That never happened whatsoever. Mind you, they would say that, I suppose so. But there are still stories of the supernatural and some kind of a curse on the house. And this is the alternate version, if you will. The house was built while Taiwan was under Japanese under Japanese rule. And during this time, businesses flourished after the Japanese built up the city after a devastating earthquake in 1906. At the time, it was the fourth biggest city in all of Taiwan, and while that didn't stay that way, at the time it certainly was. Now, after the Japanese left, they say that fortunes fell, and this was why the Louis family actually left. But then why would the mansion be haunted? There are stories about the Japanese army opening fire around the house for no apparent reason while the Japanese army temporarily stayed there, ending in killing a number of innocent soldiers in the crossfires. Now, given the discipline of the Japanese army, what were they shooting at and why? If they were the only ones there, and they would have been, what was going on in the house that got them so scared that they would open fire? There are bullet holes in the walls, so that absolutely seems to have been a truth. And then, of course, several Japanese soldiers died during whatever scared them. Now, a few years after the Japanese army left, the mansion was also occupied by the KMT, the Kuomintang of China, the Chinese Nationalist Party of Taiwan, which thereafter came to power in 1949. By this time, parts of the Minjeong haunted house had already been damaged, but during bombs when the American army raided in the Second World War, and parts of the interior had been stripped away to build nearby schools, so it was already a little bit run down and somewhat haunting, at least. There was no electricity there, and at night the grounds were left in complete darkness, which the soldiers did not like. So, after several complaints from KMT soldiers claiming that they saw ghosts outside the window, it became something of a problem. And in fact, even these soldiers insisted that electricity be rerouted to the house to keep what they felt was an unnatural darkness outside. There were also a string of deaths that apparently happened there. Um, so certain of the KMT soldiers got sick and died. Um, some stories say that a few of them committed suicide. Now, this becomes difficult to establish exactly, but it seems that there are several ghosts. And of course, this naturally uh, has resulted in even more stories because, well, you started with ghosts, you got more ghosts as a result of the ghosts, and therefore, afterwards, you got even more ghosts. Well, it seems hauntings build. Now, the next interesting place to talk about is the Xinhai Tunnel. It was built for the development of the Taipei city, and it connects one of the nearby rural areas to Taipei city for faster transportation. However, um, it was notorious for its accidents due to its poor lighting and steep curves. Um, it is here that the young lady died, um, that kept trying to get home, and because of the story, there are a number of rumors that say that um, you need to be very careful to avoid ever traveling this tunnel at night. Um, it does seem to be the case that she is the only ghost in the tunnel, and she is a friendly ghost. But people will say that plenty died there, even though she is the only one, which is an interesting story. The Quanfu Elementary School is another story, but it's a little bit complicated in that Quanfu literally translates to mean liberate or reclaim in English. And it was the name of more than one elementary school in Taiwan. Such patriotic themes were common back in the day where Taiwanese wanted recognition as being independent. Many schools and government buildings back in the day were constructed during the Japanese occupation between the 1890s and 1940s, and this particular school was one of them. The oldest building of the school was a 4 stories tall circular building, which was very unusual architecture for the time. Floors 2, 3, and 4 had a circular hallway around and were open in the middle so that one can look down to the first floor. And there is a large circular skylight on the ceiling. No teacher would admit to it, but based on government records, the building was in fact used as a prison during the Japanese occupation, and a number of prisoners were tortured and executed. Prisoners were hung from the fourth floor inside the building to serve an example to others. And the one fellow that attended the school says that no students were ever allowed on the fourth floor while they were at the school. Now, the story tells that some sixth graders a few years ahead of him snuck into the circular building one night on a dare, and what seemed like a silly prank ended with one student falling over the ledge around the circular opening and dying from his injuries. It's rumored that the students found the gates to the fourth floor were left unlocked, possibly forgotten by the janitor, and they climbed up the stairs to explore the fourth floor. Obviously, you tell kids you can't go there, that's where they go. Um, they say that the circular hallway was only lit by moonlight through the skylight, and all the rooms seemed very old. They peeked through all the rooms, through the windows, and it seemed that it contained old Japanese furniture, including desks, chairs, and filing cabinets. As they were Leaving, one student saw something in the room and had a serious fright. He staggered backwards, tripped, and fell over the ledge. Confused and terrified, the rest of the students ran out of the building. One looked into the room as he ran past it and claimed he saw decapitated heads piled on the floor and bodies wearing clothes from the early 1900s, and he could hear people crying and shouting in Japanese behind him. That's a suitably creepy school story right there. Taiwan has a mandatory 2-year military service for young men when they are 18, and it went on for quite a long time, and apparently still does today. And pretty much everybody serves in the Taiwanese army at one point or another. Um, Basically, you will get a young man just out of high school, dragged off and dropped in the jungle somewhere on some tiny remote island off the coast, homesick and terrified in these new surroundings. They are forced to spend their nights on watch in these remote outposts. Um, and according to this guy, this is a story that happened to his father's platoon. They were doing the training exercise called the Night March, which is an exercise where you had to march from one base to another under the cover of darkness within a certain time limit. This is a very common thing in just about every army in the world. Failure to achieve the objective would lead to the revoking for passes of leave, and they were on a base in Nantao County, part of the central mountain system of Taiwan, where a large part of the landscape is still covered by jungle. So the night march is one of the most dreaded exercises, and there have been many accidents associated, such as the platoon getting separated and lost in the jungle, um, and people falling off cliffs and more. So that night, his platoon received the march order, and it's a 20-kilometer march in full battle gear through the jungle after a whole day of training. Fog had come in, the visibility was very poor, and the only light sources, of course, were their own personal flashlight, which they were not allowed to use without permission. The whole platoon were exhausted, and they had 4 hours to complete the objective. As they were marching, people were losing their footing left and right, and some of the squad mates were basically asleep on their feet. Halfway through, they were given the order to stop and allowed to rest for 10 minutes. And his father said he was very relieved to have a break until they realized they were next to an old abandoned cemetery. Now, these unattended burial grounds were not uncommon in the 50s and 60s, where many poor farmers who had no money for proper burials would just leave the dead in shallow, unmarked, and even uncovered graves. And he could smell the rot in the cold, wet mountain air. He didn't dare say anything. And shortly, his squad leader gave the order to get back on with the march, and as they did, they sounded off as soldiers do, and the count went to 13, but there were only 12 people in this squad, and the platoon leader screamed back at them, as all good corporals do, which one of you idiots is so sleepy he can't count? I want press-ups from everybody. And of course, everybody was upset. Who had messed it up? And they sounded off again. And again, the count reached 13. And everyone was now like, getting tired because if one person does push-ups, everybody does push-ups. So again, there it was, and they're shouting at each other, and they count off again, and 13, and now they're like, it's not funny. What's going on? So another 20 push-ups, and by this time, um, they're very upset. And then suddenly the squad leader goes, "What the fuck? Run!" And they suddenly realized, and whatever the situation was, the corporal had just spotted the 13th member of the platoon, and it seems that that's what made them run. One wonders what he saw, but the man would never say. But next to a graveyard, well, there's your answer. The next story that I've got of a ghost is from a chap called Eric, who served in the Taiwanese army in the 2000s, and he said he was also in an outpost. He was one of these nerdy, clever guys, a skinny bookworm type with glasses, and he had already been accepted to college before going into the military for his required service. It led him to light duties because he had already been accepted in college, and lots of office job, which suited him just fine. But his bunkmate was something of a prankster who claimed he could see ghosts. And Eric, being the sort of person he was, just laughed it off whenever his bunkmate reported the paranormal activities during night shift. But one night he was doing a night watch duty from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. and his bunkmate was on the previous shift, and as they were switching off between each other, his bunkmate said to him, "It's busy out there tonight. Keep your eyes open." Now, he was not amused by this, but what can you do? So he went out to his post in the cold, as is traditional for soldiers. Now, the entrance of the base is well lit, and nothing happened as he stood his watch for the first 2 hours. But around 3 a.m., where he saw somebody flip over the wall and run towards the officer's bunk. Startled by this, he went to go and see. It's not uncommon that some senior officer would sneak off base for a drink or two, and he didn't want to cause trouble that could jeopardize his own cushy assignments. But he found that one of the officers' bunk windows were lit, so he peeked in, and he found one of the officers awake at his desk. The officer noticed him and called him in. He explained to the officer what he saw and that he was investigating if someone had snuck in, as he also mentioned that his bunkmate had been telling spooky stories that made him nervous. The officer laughed and said, don't worry about that nonsense. It's not worth worrying about. So, reassured, he went back to his post and later switched off with the next shift. In the morning, he went to look for the senior officer again, wanting to thank him for his encouragement. However, he couldn't find the officer. And when he arrived at the officer's bunk, he found that the room was one that actually had not been used for many years. People told him that it belonged to an old officer from China who had no family in Taiwan. He had died in an accident 5 years previously when he went out the base to have a drink and returned drunk. He fell asleep behind a military truck and was accidentally run over. And it seems, therefore, that what he had seen was a ghost. Was it true? Hard to say, but there you are. So, the ghosts of Taiwan. They are very logical ghosts. And while there's a lot of the tragedies and suicides in the stories, the ghosts seem to act and react very much in the way that ghosts do all around the world, which bolsters our set of knowledge, as it were, as to what makes ghosts ghosts. They certainly do fit to it. But I dare say that we will now find some more differences as we move into the next section of our stories, which is that of cryptids. Now, cryptids are those creatures which a great many people do believe exist, which may in some cases actually exist, but which science says either no longer exist or does not believe exist. So that's basically what we are going to talk about now. And most cryptids come from folklore and myth, and generally are things that people would say don't exist. But they can include things such as the coelacanth, which absolutely does exist, and we have now discovered is very much alive and well and living off the coast of South Africa, despite the fact it was said to have gone extinct many, many years ago. So you get varied varieties of cryptids. As we progress, I would like to remind everybody to like, share, subscribe, send lots of love and hearts and gifts and things to keep us going, because we absolutely do need to. And sadly, it seems it is a very quiet night tonight. But nevertheless, what do we have as cryptids? We have the Mosina, we have the Ao Yin, the Hai Chung Mao Jin, the Dainu, and several other creatures that fit to uh, the Taiwanese fascination for cryptids. Now, the first thing is the Mosina, uh, a monstrous creature from Taiwanese folklore, generally depicted as human-like but furry. Now, what makes this very interesting is the description of it, which fits almost exactly to that of a Bigfoot. So it seems that Taiwan does have Bigfoot. However, in this particular culture, they are referred to as demons. They are said to lure people away in remote spots like mountain forests and caves. Um, and in traditional Taiwanese style, it was turned into several horror movies, in fact, as well. But it seems that our Bigfoot is found yet again um, in another culture and in another country, despite the fact of distance and difference, and described in exactly the same basic way. So you may make of that what you will, but maybe it says that Bigfoot really does or did exist. Now, the next interesting thing is the Aoyin, which is a man-eating humanoid monster from desolate areas, having a long tongue, sharp claws, and wearing shattered clothes. It has a taste for human brains, and the only way to kill it is by smashing its tongue. Now, the Aoyin is very obviously a ghoul of some variety, um, and fits to the general description of what ghouls might be. So you may make of that as you as you will, but a possibly undead creature that has a particular penchant for human flesh. Now, there are a number of other such creatures that go along with the Mushin and all. There is also the cat ghosts, which are said to sneak inside houses to kill small babies. Um, and in fact, it caused a practice where old people believed that you should hang a dead cat on a tree outside so that it doesn't become this kind of ghost. They also have, amongst other things, something called a bamboo ghost, a fluffy sea monster, and an underground cow, which you may make of as you will. So let's see what we can find out more about that at least. The banana ghost is a female ghost that lives in banana trees and appears wailing under a banana tree at night, sometimes carrying a baby. Uh, some say that if you ask the ghost, um, they can tell you winning lottery numbers, and they often tie a red string around a banana tree trunk or stick needles in the tree, which causes the ghost to appear and beg the person to set her free, and then in turn will give them their winning numbers. But if a person does not set the ghost free after winning, they will meet a horrible death. So it seems a bit of a cruel thing to do to a ghost, but there you go. Make of it as you will. Excuse, excuse, excuse. So varied ghost type things. Uh, is that a proper ghost or some kind of a spirit? Not entirely certain, but nevertheless. They also have things like a sort of fluffy one-eyed ghost, which is um, supposed to turn up at certain times. It's kind of hard to say exactly how and why. They have a specialized deer, larger than the normal, with a large pair of fangs. And they say that this roaring deer can bring about flooding as well. The sound of such deer is sometimes like that of a crying baby, and they use their power to create floods to damage and destroy um, human settlements. But sometimes it seems it can be a benevolent creature that um, while it can cause torrential downpours and flooding, um, sometimes the creature will um, bring peace and safe rain, which perhaps is good for your farmers. There's also a monster monkey, which again seems to fit in certain ways to the stories um, of the Bigfoot type creatures. Excuse me. So perhaps there is that goes along as well. Um, different tribes also have a fair number of other stories, one of which say that there is a kind of ghost-like creature that throws rocks at house windows, and sometimes these naughty ghosts would become friends with a child left alone. And in order to make friends with the child, the ghost would make a kind of sticky rice cake, and parents would come home and say that a friend came and um, made them the cake to eat. And some said that it's kind of like having an imaginary friend, except this one is actually there and can bring you sweets. But would you want your child to make friends with a ghost? It seems that there is quite a lively travel between the living and the dead, and spirits lurking therein. The next interesting story we have on the cryptid side of things is an underground cow, and she is the cause, as it were, of earthquakes. And they say that um, that thing is out there, um, ready to roll over and cause the next earthquake. Now, your fluffy sea monster is an interesting one. It has one eye and a great fluffy load of hair on it. Um, but this one actually is a good one. It lives in the sea, and it will give directions to sailors if they are lost. And it seems that if you are nice to it, uh, you can you can get all kinds of help from this strange fluffy creature. But of course, if you don't do the right things in that regard, you can almost guarantee a giant storm that might well sink your ships. So you've got to be careful with how you deal uh, with the ghosts and spirits that you deal with. So there are a lot of other similar type strange creatures, some of which are kind of ghosts, some of which are kind of not, like the Daolagui, which is found in damp and cold places in the deep mountains, a frightening appearance that can spit poisonous gas or sometimes even a dart from its mouth. It's again accompanied by strong winds and storms, and possibly because their voice sounds like a grown man roaring. There are male and female versions, the male being dark green while the female is purple. Um, and apparently, the male creatures are far more toxic. If you're struck by their poison, you will die within a day. And after dying, if your corpse is not burned, you might also become one of these creatures. We encountered exactly the same kind of thing in China when we did China. So that seems to be a common similarity in uh, that regard. So yeah, an interesting collection of ghosts and beasties that are found out there. But with that, we have reached, of course, the end of our stories of Taiwan. And it was a very interesting one, I think. The ghosts fit to what we expect. We found again a Bigfoot in yet another place, which fits exactly to the stories of Bigfoot. Um, though the other cryptids seem to be particular only to Taiwan for whatever reason. But there you have it. And I think it was a good one. Thank you for those who have been here and who have joined along with um, us. I hope you had fun. And we shall end on that note, and next week be back for yet another. Remember, we will have our live around about 10 o'clock South African time. So that's GMT +2, and you are very welcome to join us. So I wish you good night. Sleep deep, sleep sweet, but sleep with one eye open. Because remember, you might need that holy object near at hand, because sometimes those things that go bump in the night might very well come and go bump for you.